Further discussion? Hearing none, a round of applause for Main Street Pontiac, for the city's special events coordinator, Robin C., for their presentations. Our final presentation this evening, the City Council is eager, and this is something that we've been awaiting, an updated progress report on the American Rescue Plan Act, or ARPA, funding, obligation, spending, and just investments into the community to maximize this one-time federal funding. So I'm sure more discussion to ensue, but anything further, Mayor, before the presentation?
Well, I want to thank both our grants director, Lisa Campbell, and Ernst & Young for their hard work on moving this process forward. And we're joined tonight by Brian Jarzynski of Ernst & Young, who will walk us through exactly where things stand and how we intend to get everything obligated in the next 2 or 3 weeks here. So with that, Mr. Jarzynski, why don't you take it away?
So the presentation, we see the visual. Is there a physical copy that could be provided to council members? Is it something that the administration received?
Absolutely. I mean, we can print it and give them hard copies,
okay,
for sure. Yep.
Unless I'm missing.
I don't know if they have them.
So you don't think this evening we will have a physical copy? Okay. Well, for the sake of time, we'll proceed visually, but it's imperative the City Council
for sure
has it in our physical hands. Okay? You have the floor.
Okay, very good. So good evening, everybody. As the mayor stated, you know, we've spent a decent amount of time with the city administration working through getting an understanding of the obligations to date, looking at the projects that have been undertaken, evaluating them from a Treasury perspective, tracing those back to the reporting that has been done to date, as well as having a look at what remains to be obligated. We have a short presentation tonight to kind of give you a summary level view of what's going to happen over the next few weeks. From an overall perspective, I would say the positive news is that the dollars that council is aware of, although not seeing memorandums of understanding or contracts yet, the path to get there is very close and will be done over the next couple of weeks based on the actions that the city has taken. Before we get too far into it, I wanted to kind of readdress the timeline of the state and local fiscal recovery funds, also known as SLRF, from a U.S. Treasury perspective. These dollars originally came from the American Rescue Plan Act. There were dollars that were spread across state, local municipalities, as well as other organizations, and there were subrecipients and all types of dollars. These dollars came directly to the states, or to the city. So in our situation, we are a recipient of these dollars. As we expend these dollars or give them to other what would be called subrecipients, we're responsible for those dollars as they get spent going forward. So every dollar that comes in from a federal perspective is considered federal money and is subject to the rules, the restrictions, the management and the compliance associated with those dollars. With the American Rescue Plan Act, there were obviously, I'll call them spirit of ARPA type activities to help communities recover from the pandemic and the impact of that. That's just basically just a summary of the ARPA perspective. I will also say from an overall perspective, the projects, the programs, the dollars that are being spent by the city, we have looked at and we have seen that they are all consistent with the American Rescue Plan requirements. We don't have any concerns from that perspective. Throughout 2021 and 2022, there have been a number of, I guess I'll say, revisits of the American Rescue Plan Act. Frequently asked questions have been distributed, additional rules, additional guidance, because as communities, states, all types of municipalities received information, there were, of course, questions, there were clarifications. One of the concerns Treasury had from the outset was the flexibility of using these dollars over the period of time, which really means you have to obligate them by the end of this fiscal year, and you have to expend them by December of 2026. Many communities had questions and so forth. So you see through 21 and 22, there continue to be changes to the rules, allowances for different expenditures and so forth. All in total, there's about 490 pages of information around how you can spend these dollars, and all of them are relevant and all are items that we've considered as we've gone through this. At the end of the day, What matters is we have an obligation that comes up at December 31 of 2024. It's an important date because if you have not obligated these dollars, the dollars are considered unobligated and are eligible, in theory, for recapture by the federal government. Now, we haven't seen any activity from the government that states that they would do that. We also know, though, we've had a change in administration. Things can always happen. So it's important that we obligate these dollars by December 31. And I know that council and the city together are aware of that. In some respects, that's part of the reason we are now engaged. After December 31 of 2024, you don't have to have the dollars spent. You have to have a place where you're going to spend them. We then have a few years, with the exception of a few programs, that you ultimately have to actually expend the dollars. So 2 years from now, we have to be able to show that we've spent the dollars on the projects that we designed or put in place and approved. So that's just a timeline. And before I move on, are there any questions on that, any clarifications?
Questions on timeline?
On this, yes.
All right, please proceed.
Okay, so currently, and just to refresh, and we try to keep this at a summary level, the city received $37.7 million. To date, with $10 million of that being the general fund usage for other government services, which is an allowable use from a city perspective, we've obligated $22.9 million. What that means is we've entered into contracts or entered into memorandums of understanding, or in some ways have shown Treasury that we've expended the dollars. What remains to obligate is currently a number of about $14.8 million. Now, many of these programs and projects are familiar to council as well as, for sure to the city, and I assume to most citizens. And so next we're going to talk about what is the path to get these obligated. There are 2 items that will be added. So these will be items, actually, you know what, we'll go forward 1 slide, and then we'll come back to that. So this is the breakdown of what we would call unobligated funds. And you'll see there are a number of different initiatives and then the dollar amounts below them. Programs such as the mini park design and build, the home repair contract amendments, items that have been communicated to council by the city and are merely either waiting for contract signature or waiting for approval from a city council perspective in concept of memorandums of understanding or moving of the dollars to the appropriate agency. Now, one would say, well, how do we get these all obligated in this time period? As we go through this exercise, Treasury, again, as I've told you, has put out a number of questions or clarifications, I would say, in terms of how items get obligated. There are a number of clear ways. One is to contractually sign and say we're going to pay for this project. Of course, the easiest one is to expend. Then there is an opportunity to also effectively go through an exercise of putting these dollars in the various departments of the city through a memorandum of understanding. It's a formal document. This memorandum of understanding has to have the scope of work that's going to be completed, directives to the relevant department, and more importantly, cannot be modified after December 31 of 2024. So if we say we're going to spend the dollars, if we say we're going to spend or put $3.9 million to the Youth Rec Center, which is one of the categories here, that memorandum of understanding will clarify that, and it will state that. It will also include a message that the dollars cannot be reallocated. That would be considered an obligation short of a contract. So effectively, we're obligating the funds, but more formally than just a budget amendment or an approval from a resolution and things like that.
Okay, I got to stop you there. Our council rules require that if we get a presentation, it's in writing for, in part, this very reason. So I'm not slamming you. I'm just saying it really compromises our ability to follow along. So I got to play Monty Hall here. Under Parks and Recreation, this is unobligated funds, $14 million plus. Correct, sir?
Yes.
So breaking it down by Parks and Recreation, $459,000 for Maddie McKinney Hatchet Park improvements in the Parks and Recreation category. The City Council has voted to approve that construction agreement. Does that suffice for obligation? What's next that would obligate that?
The contract
Who wants to
signature.
Take it? Okay, so it's been approved by council in previous weeks or months, but it has not been executed yet. So unless and until it's obligated or executed, it does not qualify as obligated.
The
Meaning if
resolution
between
doesn't
now and December 31st, John Hancock ain't on that paper, $459,000 goes back to the federal government, possibly. Got it? Okay, next category, $148,200 modular bathroom. Under the Parks and Recreation budget, can you explain to us what that's referencing?
Mayor.
Yeah, this is what we've proposed in terms of we had $2 million allocated towards community parks. And for the design and engineering services in community parks, we have contracted in roughly ballpark terms $1 million. We also moved some money from the community parks category to the Matty Hatchett Park category. And we want to use most of the remaining dollars there for bathroom installations in the community parks, which are our larger parks.
Okay, so that didn't clarify for me. What's $148,200 modular bathroom? Is that a specific? Is that Murphy Park?
No, it's allocating
the design
funds for bathrooms in the parks. Now, we don't know yet how many bathrooms that'll cover because we're in the process of assessing that, but this is about allocating funds for the purpose of improving or installing bathrooms in some or all of the community parks.
How does the administration or the ARPA coordinator, we've contracted with Ernst & Young, how do you propose that to happen before the year is done? What steps are
That'll be done
needed?
through a memorandum of understanding.
But this is something that has not come before council yet, correct?
Right. So
per your
on
understanding.
December 3rd, my understanding is you will get that resolution to pass it.
Okay. Finally, under Parks and Recreation, $4,161,000 on mini park design build. Is that something that still needs council action?
It is, and there will be a two-step process here. I believe Brian's familiar with this. If not, I think Director Campbell can speak to it. And I know Director Campbell just passed out the actual paper copies of the presentation.
But yeah, if anyone can answer that, $4.161 million between now and the next 3 city council meetings, that needs a city council vote. That has not been voted on. Is that a true statement?
Yes, an MOU will be presented before council to obligate those funds.
Okay, thank you. Youth Recreation Center, over $3.9, almost $4 million for Youth Recreation Center. Will a vote of City Council tonight on approving the construction management satisfy that obligation, or is this a separate threading of that needle?
It is both, I believe. Yeah, it's both. So there are some of those dollars will need to go before City Council in the form of an MOU, and the vote tonight for the CMAR would satisfy the rest.
Okay, so that's a lot more asterisk there on a big dollar amount about what council still has to do versus what is before us tonight. Next, home repair program, almost over $1.8 million in home repair contract amendments. Has that already been decided by City Council? What's left for obligation?
Those will come before City Council. Well, those actually went before City Council. And so it's execution at this point. I see Deborah shaking her head if she wanted to add. But those do not need to, that money does not need to come before City Council.
So the administration's current answer is that that $1.8 million has already been obligated or acted on from the council side. They have to execute the contract.
With one caveat, Mayor, I think you were going to chime in.
Yeah, we're proposing, and Brian was going to get to this, I believe is the next slide. We're proposing to add $500,000 to that category and also $500,000 to the Youth Rec Center category. So, Brian, do you want to quickly speak to that?
Are there more slides?
This is it.
Okay.
So there's there was $932,000 that has not been discussed at the council level. And so what the city administration has determined to do and is going to bring before council is allocating an additional $500,000 to the home repair program, which again, to be clear, will be, once it's allocated and MOU'd to the home repair program, it's fine and it can be expended over the next 2 years. as well as putting in another $432,953 to that youth rec center category that you looked at previously. So again, this is a path to getting the ARPA funds all obligated.
Okay, can you return to the master sheet here? Okay. $500,000 for workforce development that has not come before City Council. What steps are required to get that obligated?
MOUs, again, for those funds as well. And I welcome Manager Younger to come up and speak as well if she has additional input.
Okay. And while she's going up, $500,000 for placemaking, that also has not come before City Council yet. So if you want to, I believe that you can elaborate further on when or in what format that will come to Council.
For both the placemaking and the workforce development, we have applications that are being reviewed and processed. We will do an MOU before December 31st for placemaking and workforce development.
Okay. 1.25 million small business subrecipient grants. It had been on the agenda for tonight's City Council meeting. The administration requested that be postponed to the next council meeting. Does the City Council's vote, if we approved all of the recommended grants, does that satisfy what council needs to do to obligate the funds, but then does it also require every one of those small business grant recipients also getting their contract signed before December 31st? What's the obligation act with the small business?
No, by the same token, the MOU that we would do an MOU, so we would not have to execute those contracts by December 31st.
And who is the memorandum of understanding with?
The grants and, right, with grants and the grants department. So MOUs would be for all of those program categories. It's an MOU between grants and philanthropy and economic development.
Okay, more questions on that, but we need to get through this so I can take my seat, so I don't have to keep helping us all see this tiny text. So $500,000 technical assistance. What's the deal?
Most of that has been obligated. There are still a few outstanding contracts that have to be.
Okay, so that's the small business technical assistance
Correct.
program the council approved last year. $825,000 small business loans. What's the scoop on that? Did our vote with Genesis Credit Union satisfy it from the council side?
This council side is satisfied.
Okay, $17,000 city business events. Does that still need council action? What does that reference?
Right. That would need council action. That's for upcoming small business initiatives, similar to Small Business Saturday that we're planning in the future.
Okay. And so just below is $8,000 Small Business Saturday. Again, still needs council action. Correct?
Those are mini contracts, so they're like
in terms of the
2,000,
threshold?
Yeah, so like the trolley is a couple of thousand, that type of thing, so. No.
Okay. Under the arts and culture category, $300,000 arts sub-recipient grants, still not obligated. Does council action need to be taken for that to happen?
Yes, MOU, again.
Okay. $200,000 city-ran arts project. What does that reference, and has council acted on it?
Yeah, this is money that we've said there still needs to be, I believe, an action taken in the form of an MOU, but this is funding that we've said for some time is part of that $500,000 arts and culture bucket. $300,000 of that bucket, we've gone out with competitive process for awarding grants to community entities, but the other $200,000 we're proposing to hold for Arts Commission events, other arts-related events in the community that are operated by the city, things like Music in the Parks, things like the Arts Crawl, over the next 2 years.
Okay. $501,000 GVI employees, gang violence intervention. It is not yet obligated. The last time council voted on related items has been many months ago. Is more council action needed, or is it about executing?
This is just the supporting documentation to show that the money's been obligated. No council actions needed here.
Okay. Mayor?
Well, I want to make sure this is a question on my part too. We've got in-house GVI employees, and those positions were created with council approval, but do we need an MOU officially designating these funds for their salaries and benefits over the next 2 years? I don't know the answer to that.
I don't believe so. Per my conversation with E&Y, I provided supporting documentation earlier today, so that should be sufficient. So this should move to obligated.
Okay, parking, $450,000 and change. Parking, what is that referencing? Has it been has the council action been satisfied?
Mayor, if you could chime in on the parking.
Yeah, so this is for the parking meters that council approved the contract for, to have new parking meters downtown that actually function properly with proper signage. So all of this relates to that contract that City Council has already approved. I believe that the only thing we're waiting on is final execution. I know that they've had some supply chain problems that have prevented delivery of those meters so far. I don't know what the status is on that contract, but we'll want to make sure that that's executed if it hasn't already been.
Okay. We're all going to have questions. This is just about all being on the same page. Finally, $30,000 plus for Department of Public Works. Chipper, what's the deal? Has council done their side of the obligation?
I believe that's coming before council in the next couple of weeks. Yeah.
Okay. So I'm going to take my seat unless there's another slide that has very small numbers. Okay, so Parks and Recreation, Youth Recreation Center, Home Repair, Economic Development, Arts and Culture, Gang Violence Intervention, Parking, and DPW. Those are the categories breaking down the unobligated funds in excess of $14 million. So as you heard, there are at least, I would say, half or more of these specific examples still need council action, or approximately 50%. So before we even get to the meat of the deliberation, I'm going to take my seat now. The first thing I'm going to say is that this obviously needs to come before council weekly for the next 3 weeks, the next 3 city council meetings. This is our last council meeting in November. So this is something, the breakdown of unobligated funds and the progression to get to zero needs to be on the next 3 city council meetings, December 3rd, 10th, and 17th, because that's going to take up a lot of time and a lot of oxygen. So that way, if this city sends back any money, it ain't because the city council didn't make a decision or didn't have it come before us. It is a few days away from December 2024, if Father Time in my mind is right. Yeah, so here we are, November 19th, 2024. Nearly 3 years, 3 years that this administration has been in place. From the beginning of the year, I've been very clear and very explicit about how concerning it is that it was slow moving. 11 months have gone by. And here we are, where there's so much pressure on 3 city council meetings, and that's not even the only steps needed to obligate it. So I appreciate that you're here at the 11th hour, in the 11th month, at the 11th day, that you are here at the 11th hour to help, bring this to finality, to satisfy what the federal government needs for it to be invested in our community, used for our community. But thank you, Director Campbell, for getting us printed copies. That's very, very helpful. Is there further presentation, or that concludes the slides that you wish to flag for us before we get into further questions and deliberation?
No, I'm happy to answer questions. I guess what I would say is that the message here is that there's a path, right? My understanding from discussions with the city administration as well is that these are projects that you're familiar with. So that's why I say the path is there. There are those 2 items we talked about that I don't believe had been discussed previous. The ability to get the memorandums of understanding that are necessary is there as well. We've provided a template and we provided direction on how to do those things. So as council approves things, these things should move quickly. To the extent there are contracts that are outstanding, those need to be monitored very closely because we need them signed. But most of these are subject to memorandums of understanding and can be done assuming council approves the suggestions of the administration.
Yeah. I'm not a gambling man, and I'm not even good at making gambling analogies, but it felt like 3 and 4 years ago, the city of Pontiac had a winning hand, a guaranteed winning hand. It was all good. It was all positive. Maybe we'd work through what were the priorities. But now there's only a few rounds left in this card game, and our hand looks more dicey because there's only a few more rounds left in this game when it could have been obligated so much sooner. So I just want to set the table there. The council leadership will keep, on behalf of the council, pushing to prioritize and to get this information to the council and the community. Because part of what we're faced with now, as I warned 11 months ago, is that by doing it in the last meeting or two, if we say no, or it doesn't pass the smell test, or that's not the right priority, it means nothing. So it's all of what they propose or nothing. And I don't like being in that situation because it means no matter what your feedback is, no matter what your engagement is about how to influence the outcome, it's backs against the wall. And if there isn't a solution, then it can't get finished before the ticking clock. So think about it. Our last meeting is December 17th, scheduled meeting of the City Council. And there's 14 days, not business days, we got major holidays there, in which if that was the last day and we vote on millions of dollars obligating it, they've got to move heaven and earth to make sure it gets law department and contracts and mutual entities getting that obligated. That's a very uncomfortable situation when we had such a winning hand that was all to the good for the people of Pontiac. Now, a lot of good stuff's still going to happen, but I don't think it had to be this brinksmanship right at the verge. So I know that there's questions and feedback from everyone. I'll start going down the road, 1 through 7. Councilman Rutherford, you have the floor.
Okay. So I'm going to make a statement. This is about to become a fire sale because this administration has a tendency to kick the can to where I am afraid that we're going to end up sending back $14,773,537.57. That's what's supposed to be allocated. And there's a reason why I'm making this statement. They did a presentation in August. Do you recall, Deputy Mayor, the presentation that you guys did? And in the presentation, you guys told us that the only amount of money that needed to be obligated was about $5 million. Now it's November, and it's $14 million. And my question is very simply, how long did you know the 14 was supposed to be obligated? Do you have a plan to where you're just strictly trying to obligate it to the youth center? If that is what it is, I could accept it. At least you're telling us the truth. And why did you kick the can? And I am afraid because I have no confidence in this. I have no confidence in this. And I know y'all want to pussyfoot around it, but I'm going to tell you what it is. I have no confidence that this is going to get done. And we are going to be the laughing stock because we're going to probably be one of the only cities in the state of Michigan that's going to send money back. And we need to ask, what have you been doing that we still got $14 million? Contracts have not been signed. And if you ask Deborah to get up here, she would tell you she's been waiting on contracts since January. This is wrong. And it's a lie, and y'all got to stop because you are making bad decisions that are going to affect everybody in here. Somebody knows somebody to know somebody that was supposed to benefit from this money, and you do not have a plan to execute, and I do not believe you're going to deliver, and that's all I want to say.
District 2, Councilwoman Jones, you have the floor.
Thank you. This is unnerving. This is embarrassing. All of these categories are not eligible for MOUs, if I heard correctly. All of these categories cannot be executed by the end of the year. A good half of these should have been done in the summertime. Whether we vote on what we need to still contribute to or not, this does not look promising. You mentioned, sir, that there is a path here, but this path is not feasible. And this is coming from someone who doesn't even let Kohl's cash expire. If I were to let $14 million go to waste, I would probably never sleep again. I would never feel content again. And eventually, we're going to stop getting these handouts. We're going to stop getting assistance. And we're going to be, like Councilwoman Rutherford said, the only city in Oakland County who is not given help because people will think that we do not know how to handle our finances. That should not be the case. So that was my opening statement. My question here is, just in case I misheard something, I would like someone to please go back and redefine the word execution. Are you saying someone has to get out there in December and start building these bathrooms in order for $148,200 to not go to waste? And that goes for the rest of the items on this list, on this chart here as well. For the items that council needs to approve, whether we do it or not, it doesn't seem like we're going to retain all of these funds. So rather than giving us this entire chart at this point, since we're going to lose millions, I would suggest for the administration to narrow down what is feasible, what does qualify for an MOU, and let's focus on the categories that we can attend to and shake our heads at the rest and try to do better in the future. But my main question here, please someone redefine execution.
I'm going down the speakers list, but to her question, sir, do you have an answer in terms of specifically, or if Director Campbell, in terms of what obligates or what satisfies the modular bathroom as one specific example?
So for clarification, the December 31st, 2024 deadline is for obligation of funds only. The projects have until the end of 2026 to be completed. So execution is different from obligation. Obligation is committing the funds to a contractor, to a vendor, to a department at the MOU, but no bathrooms have to be built before December 31st. None of this has to happen or be executed by December 31st.
Well, the confusion is that oftentimes it's referring to execution of contract.
Right.
So there's execution needs to happen, but project completion has a 2026 deadline. Council's concern still is, how is it obligated? How is it satisfied category by category? Thank you for elaborating on the modular bathroom. Keeping the speakers list going, Pro Tem, you have the floor.
Yes, thank you, President McGinnis. First and foremost, I'd just like to thank the company for coming in with a better breakdown of ARPA funds. My concern has always been that we're actually doing too many projects. That was my concern 3 years ago, and still my concern tonight. For me, I know it's at the closing. It's a tough one. It's a tough one, but at least you stated that we can hopefully get there. But if not, I want to ask the administration, are they thinking about obligating more of this to the youth center, and would that meet the obligation?
You're yielding to the mayor?
Yes.
Okay.
It would, and and I know President McGinnis already explained this, but I know there's confusion because of the use of the term execution, but the term as it was used by the presenter was in signing contracts, not in even beginning the work. The work doesn't have to actually begin in terms of shovels in the ground this December, and that's why I believe he said there's a path here. And my understanding is Ernst & Young is going to have all these needed MOUs prepared so that they can come before council on December 3rd, specifically. That's what we've been told. So I think there's not just a theoretical or hypothetical path here, but this is very doable and manageable. Yes, that's one of the reasons why we've proposed adding money to the home repair program and to the community center, the youth rec center, because those are both very important priorities, I think not just for the administration, but also for city council. And we've suggested adding funds into those projects, to answer your question.
Anything further, Pro Tem?
No, thank you.
Councilman James, you have the floor.
Yes, I have a request that the next time that you come to give this report, for each one of these categories, if you would list what is the medium that we're going to use to obligate. So a lot of what you've said will be MOUs, but I'd like for the next report to actually show, like 459 Matty Hatchett, is that all going to be done by MOU? So if your next report could show that.
Yep, we'll do a breakdown by category with each project underneath it, and we'll show the current status and what the path is.
And for those that have more than one that we have to, because I think she mentioned something about there was a contract and also, so there were going to be two things. We really need that level of detail.
For sure.
So we need to understand for each item, what is the medium that we're going to use? Is it MOU? Is it contract? Is it both? And then we'd like some kind of a status on both of those. Okay, if that's possible. The other question I have is under economic development, the $825,000 for small business loans. I understand that the repayment of those loans was posing some problem with the ARPA guidelines. If you could address that, are we okay now with this loan thing? Are we going to have to repackage what we are calling a loan program so that it will meet federal guidelines? Because we don't want this jumping up at us at the last minute.
Yeah, for sure.
Is it or isn't it a problem?
It depends on how we show the obligation as an expenditure. So if we treat it as a true straight-up ARPA small business loan program, it's not that there's challenges in actually doing it. The reporting is quite extensive. It involves discounted cash flows. You can only do the loan for the project costs, so you have to do like a 3-4 year analysis. Alternatively, what many communities have done with this program is utilize the general revenue loss category, because Treasury allows you to effectively make the loans and you're done. And then you can monitor them how you wish. You don't need to report them any further to Treasury going forward. So we are looking at that and discussing with the administration the best path forward with that.
Is that, I mean, how comfortable are you that that's going to satisfy?
Oh, it's a mechanism.
That
It's an absolute mechanism to obligate the dollars.
Okay.
Either way we do it, having the memorandum of understanding is fine. It's the reporting that becomes more of the burden, not
Right,
the,
but what
not-
you're proposing, what I'm saying is what you are proposing as a solution, is that, how solid is that? That, you know, that
it's
will
solid.
work?
It's absolutely it's something we've done in other communities.
Okay.
Thank you. Councilman Parker.
Thank you, Brother President. Firstly, I'm going to say that I agree with everything that the other 5 councilors have said. But more importantly, certainly is concerned because we have sit here for 3 3/4 years listening to the community say, this is what we need and this is what we would like. I sit here, there's 8 categories and 17 subcategories of money being distributed. We know that home repair could get some more money, and it'll help the citizens. We know small businesses could get some more money, and it will help the citizens. We know there's some senior initiative that's been presented that could get some more money and could get approved. We know workforce development could get some more money. We know that there's some warming center needs that could get some more money. And yet we're sitting here with 17 different categories of how to dispense the money. And a lot of the things I just mentioned, contracts have already been signed and agreed to, that we could just say we'll increase the money to, and we would not be pushed. It does not make sense that we have been sitting here for 3 3/4 years, and now we're down to the last 2 months to say we got to get this done. And everybody's going to be pushed, and something ain't going to get there when we have had every opportunity to do what was right and still have an opportunity to do what was right. If we just look at where we allocated the money and say we need to go back and put some where we've already allocated and let that be that. Because the citizens have said that's what they want. The community has said that's what they want. And we should, at some point, start listening to what the people of Pontiac want. I'm done.
Thank you. Mayor Grimel?
Yeah, thank you. I want to just begin by saying that in the presentation that was done the last time on this, that was delivered, we did not identify $5 million as unobligated. What we identified was actually that $5 million was either not obligated or allocated in some way towards this. And I specifically pointed out that actually more than that was not obligated. So I just want to be clear that we're continue to try to be transparent. This is important because it's more specific, and we want to get into the details here, especially as we close this out. But this is going to get obligated. This is a reflection not just on what we came up with in terms of the 17 subcategories and the 8 categories, but this is based on allocation buckets that were approved by City Council almost 2 years ago, and based on other contracts and expenditures that have been approved by City Council. So this didn't come out of thin air in terms of all these categories. I understand we're have some time constraints here in terms of obligating, and then we've got 2 years to actually spend the dollars. But these categories have all been discussed with council before. And so I do want to be clear about this. These did not come out of the blue.
I want to defend Councilman Parker's point that he was making. It's that, yes, there are these categories, broad categories that were agreed upon in 2022, 2 years ago. And the point is that by allowing the loss of time, we cannot make as strategic decisions and make sure it's as benefiting the citizens as directly because of that lost time. And if there's any last-minute gap, we can look to those priorities, initiatives that still are ongoing and hopefully can meet the obligation window. The takeaway is that the council hopes that the administration can, fish and cut bait. I'm not a fisherman. I don't know that metaphor either. But in terms of if there are these initiatives that aren't going to be finalized, pivot so that way we can make sure it can still be utilized to benefit the city. So I think Councilman Parker's point is still very apt and excellent. That may ultimately be what happens. Sounds like there's another round. Councilwoman Rutherford. Okay, Councilwoman Jones.
Okay, to follow up on the explanation for execution, even when referring to contract executions, let's consider the possibility that some type of legal attention may be needed to be given to these contracts. There may be delays because of the holidays. Like Council President McGinnis said, we have major holidays coming up. Perhaps there are internal reviews that need to be completed. When you wait to the last minute, you run into these scenarios where almost any little thing can trip you up by a few hours, and then you end up missing out. It's just like being late to work. You miss every traffic light on the road, and then you end up missing the mark. So to Council President's point, the administration should consider pivoting. As Councilman Parker stated, the grants program, they can use additional funds. There's so many. The library could even use the funds. I mean, pivoting to anything, that would be beneficial for our citizens would be much better than throwing $14 million in the toilet, $10 million in the toilet. We have to get a plan together for these last few weeks, and that is all I would like to say.
I'd like to recognize Councilman Goodman as present voting at 7:12 p.m. Councilwoman Rutherford, you're next on the speakers list.
So, I want to speak as transparently as I can. There are things that are not going to get done, and we can't pussyfoot around it anymore. And we also have to, as a council, come to a decision for us to make some hard choices, because we have given them latitude, we've given them opportunity, we've given them chances, and this administration has not met up to what is the standard of how to get this done. So I am looking for the council to try to take this thing over and make sure that it's done correctly, because if we don't, we have lied to our citizens. We have lied to ourselves. We said one time we were going to do home child care. That's not even up there anymore. We said one time that we were going to make sure that all the 238 people that got home repair had the funding available. That $500,000 doesn't even scratch the surface. Now, Ms. Younger may not be able to say that because she works for the city, but I can because I'm just an elected official. We actually need $2.8 million to make sure the 238 people houses get repaired. We have told these people, the small businesses, that we're going to make sure that they get 50, 40, 20, and 10. I say put the money where it can go, and we figure out the rest, because what's going to happen is we're going to say we're going to save this money for us to do this youth center, when in reality we don't even know our bond rating. We don't know if we can get our bonds, so we can't guarantee the $15 million that they're going to ask us to do on the bond. We have got to be strategic, and we find out today, even though the administration didn't tell us, is that the sheriff contract has ended, and we have that on the agenda as well. We have to make some tough choices. And so if it was me, it would not be parks. If it was me, it would be for the things that directly affect this community. That is housing, that is small business grants, that is child care, because those are feasible things we can do. Because we have a sheriff contract that must be renewed, and we don't even have enough money to do that. And we got to do that. And so it's time out for us to play this game of illusion and delusional things. We got to do what the Bible says. Let your yes be yes, and let your no be no. And that's all I got.
Thank you. Yes, so the sheriff's contract, my understanding, expires December 31st. And what council needs to know is, one, what's the final proposal? What's the cost impact? And two, when does it come to us? Because in addition to all these time-sensitive matters, we got major contract renewals for police services, for fire services with Waterford Regional, and it's all corralling, all these speeding trains, they all need to get into that tunnel to make their destination time, and that's what's even more concerning. So we will work to get more information from the county. Obviously, the county sheriff is under their jurisdiction. They are considering a contract proposal that gets voted on Thursday, but we have a lot of questions because we don't know those cost impacts yet. And that is by far the largest portion of our city's budget are our police services that are contracted with the sheriff department. So we didn't know what cost changes and what impact that has on the general fund balance. Councilman Goodman, I know you're joining the conversation midway, but is there anything on American Rescue Plan Act obligation that you'd like to have the floor?
I mean, I'm assuming that my colleagues have said much of what I would want to say, but the fact that we are, again, having this conversation, period, is absolutely ridiculous to me. There is no reason why we are at the 11th hour for anything when it comes to this money that we have had for years, that our previous congressperson, whose district does not even exist, got for us, and yet we have done nothing really tangible to obligate the majority of it. There should be no world in which this council or this community is sitting here worried about us obligating or spending money. There are a mountain of issues and things that could be addressed with this money, as has been mentioned. Housing, small businesses, any number of things, but yet we are sitting here with millions of dollars that are not obligated when this community and this council has been very forthright about what needs to be done. And I am just gravely disappointed. I feel like a father at this point. I'm deeply disappointed in every possible way because every single one of us has come into office with the hope of actually doing something to benefit and build up the city. And while we've been able to do some things, we could have been doing a whole lot more had people been coordinated in carrying out this work. And again, this is beyond ridiculous that we are sitting here almost at Thanksgiving at the very last moment when this money can be spent, and we're scrambling to figure it out. It's embarrassing. It's an absolute embarrassment.
Councilman James.
Yes, I have a couple more. I have a question about under Parks and Rec. We allocated a couple of years ago when we did the original allocation $4 million for the mini and neighborhood parks design, and you have 4,161. Is that 4,000 or 4 million? 4 million. Is that supposed to be 4 million?
It's 4 million.
Well, I'm wondering where the 161, because the original allocation was 4 million.
Mayor, I defer, or Deputy Mayor.
Is that interest on the 4 million, or?
It's not. I think the concern has been the actual estimated cost of the work in the mini park. So that's really why we're looking at that additional funds being added to there. Okay. The original allocation, you're right, Councilwoman, was $4 million.
Okay,
but
so
I think based on some of the more recent estimates for the work that we've all talked about doing in the mini parks, that an additional, $100-some thousand is anticipated to be needed.
Okay, I thought it was the allocated amount. The other thing is the comments that you made on MOU, that process being used. If you could, in the next presentation, just list out how that process is going to work. You mentioned that the money is specified for a specific department, and it has to state that it cannot be used for any other purpose.
Yes, it has to be very specific.
Yeah. So if you could, in the next presentation, just kind of in writing, lay out that process for us, because we're not familiar with,
bring you an example.
those
I'll
kind of
show you an
things.
example.
But I'd be interested in knowing just how that is going to work in terms of our budget.
Of course.
Thank you.
I have a number of questions still on the unobligated categories. For time, we don't have to itemize them. But the two major, I asked it when I was breaking it down, what they state. But for the small business subrecipient grants, I think the council benefits, and I'm requesting a clearer understanding of when we vote on December 3rd, unless they kick the can again, but if it's ready and we're obligating the small business grant awards December 3rd, what other back-end stuff has to happen? Is it, you're saying that the MOU is sufficient. I don't know, is that 80 MOUs? Is that one entity? Because you were saying with grants and philanthropy, and that would be us ourselves. So I'm trying to find out who that other...
It'll be granted to that, it'll be one MOU. And it will say that the dollars are set aside for the small business loans. Oh, sorry.
Okay. Oh, I'm here.
Okay. And so it'll be in the MOU. It'll be specific to the terms and conditions of the small business loans. And what's important about these MOUs to understand is it has to be specific to the scope. So if we say we're going to spend it on modular bathrooms, that's where the money has to be spent. It can't be later say, well, let me rephrase. There are times where you can do some modifications to it, but they have to be within the ARPA program, and there has to be specific events that create that. But generally, they will be very specific to, I guess another way to word it is, you can't just give Parks and Rec $4.6 million and then they decide what they're going to spend it with. We're going to tell them what those dollars are for.
Okay. My question still remains that I want to have a better, clearer understanding of what happens after we vote. If it's truly one memorandum of understanding, help me understand how that, flies with the federal government. You don't have to do it tonight. We've already spent a lot of time, but that's a question that I still have. And then also me understanding the timeline with the mini and neighborhood parks. That's over $4 million. That's a big bucket, a big chunk of this unresolved matter. And I need to understand, Councilwoman James has filled me in terms of what we know from the subcommittee, but what's still left in terms of what council needs to vote on and when we expect that to come. Because based on the RFQ timeline, et cetera, it gives me concern about the closing window of our 3 existing council meetings. And I welcome at a future time if that could be broken down, if not by you, by somebody from the administration. I see a hand from Councilman Parker, Councilman Rutherford, but I just want to emphasize with this. We are being so brass tacks and so particular because we do not want to just take someone's word for it, not just you. We don't want it to be presumed that all is Gucci, all is smooth, and then the window of time is closed. Oh, but wait, we didn't dot an I or cross a T. So we need to, drill down deep, and it is not pretty, like we were saying, because of, you're saying there's a path, but the path is narrow, and that isn't cool for the taxpayers and the citizens of Pontiac. Parker and then Rutherford.
Thank you, sir. My question is, I look at the Parks and Recs. Early in our administration, we approved I think a $5.2 million for each district to spend on parks in general. Is that in addition to this $4 million, or is that just?
I'm not aware of that.
Okay.
Well, who could answer my question? I defer.
Well, I don't know that you're going to get the answer, an adequate answer tonight, but the mayor seems to want to answer it. So,
Yeah, well, how much did you say?
It was $5.2 million. We gave $750,000 to each district to upgrade their parks.
Yeah, we allocated a total of $6 million to all parks in the city. Initially, $4 million of that to neighborhood and mini parks, and $2 million to the larger community parks. And then of that $4 million, we talked about splitting that up by district to try to make sure that parks in everybody's district receive some funding. And of course, the Spark grant funding is going towards Galloway Lake Park.
So the question remains, and tonight, for time, we don't have to dissect it fully. The council would benefit, the council would benefit from a complete breakdown of obligated and unobligated as it relates to the parks, because there's $2 million that was done for community parks. We just want to make sure all is baked into the cake, depending on where the ingredient status is. Councilman Rutherford.
So my question is very serious. We started the GBI program, and those contracts are not executed or allocated. So how is those people that we're paying working if it's not allocated? Now I'm talking about the gun violence. This is before you. We was told it was $500,000. Then we was told they needed additional money. And this says, from this thing, that this not obligated. So how are they legally getting paid and working in this building if that money not obligated? And where the money coming from for their insurance and all that other stuff y'all offered, giving people $87,000? I yield to you because you would tell me the truth, Lisa Campbell.
So these funds have been legally obligated. They are on this unobligated list because we had not provided the documentation to our compliance team. So that was completed today. So this will go into the obligated category. Those are the funds for the employees. You are correct. So they are being paid legally through ARPA dollars.
Okay.
Yeah.
But prior to this, how was they being paid? Because I'm asking this for a reason. Because I asked this a month ago. Because I said we're supposed to be having them doing training, and I was told they doing training. But I'm very confused of how that was paid for.
So those positions did go before council and they were approved. So therefore, they were legally obligated.
Okay.
We just had not provided the documentation for that to our compliance team. So it was a matter of documentation here.
Okay.
Yes.
I trust you. You tell the truth. Thank you.
Okay, so we can move on if there's not any final questions or discussion, but this is front burner for the balance of the year. And we respect and understand that you might have other schedule obligations, but, oh, good. We'll see a lot more of you. Fantastic. With that, that concludes that special presentation. Moving on with the agenda, and thank you both for your time. We are now at a public hearing. This public hearing is on community feedback regarding council redistricting. Every 10 years, we're required by law as a city to redraw the lines that determine our city council seats ahead of city council elections based on census figures, meaning what's the